We are joined in the studio now by Andy Malkinson, and if that name is sounding familiar to you, he was the man whose rape conviction was overturned and is getting used to the idea of freedom, if not yet normality, and we'll come to that in a minute. And we're also joined by James Burley. Now, he is the investigator from the charity Appeal, which has played such a pivotal role in unearthing new evidence that has led to the quashing of Andy's sentence. Andy, look, it's great to have you with us on the News Agents. Thank you very much for coming in to talk to us. And I know you've done an awful lot of this sort of stuff, but this will be the first, I think, lengthy interview that you've done.
Yeah.
I guess my first question is, are you getting used to the idea of freedom?
Yes, very slowly. I mean, it's not been long now, but I am, getting used to it. I've dreamed about this, overturning it so many times that, and it's still early days, of course. It's only a week, less than 2 weeks since it was overturned. But yeah, it feels good.
Andy, could you just in case people listening aren't familiar with your case, could you just give a kind of brief potted history? I know it's a very complicated thing, but just a sort of outline of what happened and when.
Right. I was a permanent resident of the Netherlands since '93. I found myself in England in 2003 after 10 years.
You're a British citizen though, right? You're not.
I wasn't a citizen, no.
Oh, right.
No, but I was legally staying. I had all my verblijfsvergunningen, my residency permits. I had a tax file number. I don't know if it's still active, but I was a permanent resident of the Netherlands, legal, everything, working. And I found myself in the UK in 2003 for long, complicated reasons. But I was just picked up for a violent, horrific rape and questioned. And at that point, I thought, this is really bad. This is terrible. They think I'm a suspect. But I was sure it would be quickly resolved, and they'd realise I'm not the guy.
And they never did.
They never did.
And at the court case, it was purely dependent on identification. There was no forensic evidence linking you to the scene.
Absolutely none. There never was, of course. But I was convicted entirely on eyewitness testimony. And in fact, there was a lot of the description given by the victim. Many aspects of her description absolutely didn't fit me. So I was astonished that I was even a suspect. It was strange.
As the trial was progressing, did you always assume that justice would prevail, that you were going to not be convicted, or could you sense during the trial that something was happening that you were not in control of? Yeah,
both those things are true. I did hope fervently that that the truth would be unearthed and they would realise it was not me. At the same time, as the trial progressed, I got a very dark feeling about being fitted up. I sensed being fitted up rather than knew it, because at that point I didn't know how they were doing it. I didn't know why all three witnesses had identified me, but they did, and I was very confused as to why, because I never went out. During the few weeks I was staying there, I never went out at night, ever. I was working all day, I was tired, I bought a few cans of beer, sat in front of the TV and just fell asleep. That was it. I never ever went outside. So these people saying they saw me out was a complete mystery, and it felt, I've said it before, like a car crash. I was going through the windscreen in slow motion, and how do you stop something as big as that?
It must have felt completely overwhelming.
It was, yeah.
To have the sort of the state, basically slowly compiling this case that you couldn't stop.
That's absolutely right. It did. It was overwhelming. I can't really articulate how overwhelming it was. It was just devastating. I couldn't believe. It had a very surreal quality to it. So why me? Why am I being framed for this?
And you used the word, why was I being fitted up?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, like I said, the description didn't fit me in any way except for I had dark skin. I've always had dark skin. Everything else didn't fit me. So, what? The scratch. The victim said she'd clearly, very clearly, unambiguously scratched her assailant's face, you know, causing a deep, she said, I've caused a deep scratch from the the cheekbone down to the jaw. And I was seen by many people. I was working in a shopping centre. I was seen by so many people. Nobody saw me with any scratches because I never had any.
James, let me bring you in now, because aspects of this about the two eyewitnesses, I mean, there was parts of their background that were not disclosed to the court, which is stuff that you have since found out. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So these were two witnesses who were presented as being honest witnesses acting effectively out of a sense of civic duty. But through really dogged investigation, including taking the police to court, we actually discovered that there was a lot more to these people. So they were a couple. The jury had no reason to doubt that these were anything other than respectable, sort of upstanding citizens. In fact, they both had criminal histories, including for dishonesty offences. The male witness was a long-term heroin user, and most remarkably, we managed to find out that he'd been arrested on the date that he came forward as a witness, and also arrested on the date about 6 months later when he first identified Andy. And what was so remarkable about him was that his purported sightings lasted a matter of seconds. They were made from a moving vehicle. And then 6 months on, he picks out Andy after being arrested, taken to court. And then he comes to court in Andy's case and essentially gives evidence that he's completely certain he's made the correct identification. And the jury just had no idea about this information.
So the jury had no idea, and the defence team had no idea?
No, and the defence actually made an explicit disclosure request for the previous convictions of all civilian witnesses, and yet these ones weren't disclosed.
Andy, you were sighing deeply there.
Yeah, because it still sounds so implausible. And, you know, how could that even happen, you know, these sequence of events?
And then you're in prison for a crime that you haven't committed.
Yeah.
And here is the sort of almost the Faustian deal that you're confronted with, which is you can get out of prison early if you admit your guilt and go to classes with other sex offenders and whatever else, or you can maintain your innocence, which you did, and you served an extra 10 years of your life locked behind bars.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Describe what...
Well, it's not quite as simple as simply admitting you're guilty. It's more, you know, you can't sign a paper and say, okay, I did it, and then they'll put you back on the streets. It's not like that. You have to undergo intensive sex offender treatment. It used to be called SOTP. They've simply renamed it now. After 2014, it was discovered that despite holding me to ransom about doing these courses, they're actually causing an increase in the risk of reoffending. So I was held on a completely false premise there, way past my tariff. And I thought about doing it, you know, but you're going to sit there and listen to horror stories. People have done terrible things. And that's damaging enough to have to sit there and be included in that subset and then asked to describe what you'd done when you don't find, well, you've done nothing. That was an impossible choice.
Have you ever attempted to do it?
No, I didn't even attempt, but I went through it painstakingly in my head. I said, well, what if I just bite the bullet and say I did it? But then, you know, the whole group will then pick you apart. What did you do wrong? What were you feeling at the time? And you just couldn't do it. You know, you're going to go, like, listen, I didn't do it. I didn't do it.
And before we move on completely to the prison experience, were there other problems with the prosecution case other than just the unreliable, incredible nature of the witnesses?
Well, I mean, the fundamental thing was that there was non-disclosure, so the jury and the defence weren't aware of a lot of these weaknesses. But yeah, I mean, there was a weakness anyway, because the case was entirely dependent on identification evidence, which we know is a notorious source of wrongful convictions. And the prosecution also had this issue, which is that there was no forensic evidence against Andy. And the way they explained that away was by arguing a really unscientific sort of idea, but they argued that he was forensically aware and that he had somehow deliberately made sure he didn't leave any kind of trace. And when you know the details of the attack, you know that that's just such a nonsense idea.
And so, Andy, you end up getting convicted. What was your initial sentence?
Discretionary life sentence with a tariff of 7 years from the time of arrest.
And you spend that first night with that sentence in the prison cell, knowing that you're facing down that sentence.
After conviction, yeah, and sentencing, yeah. Yeah, it was terrible, terrible
What was
burden.
that like?
Terrible psychological burden, thinking, you know, what's just happened to me? You know, why am I looking at an indeterminate period behind bars? Maybe I'll die here. You know, that's a real fear, dying in prison. And so, or even dying at your own hands. You know, giving up and dying at your own hands. Lots of people kill themselves in prison.
Did you think about it?
Yeah, yeah. I thought about a lot of stuff. You know, how did this happen? How did I end up here? You know, why the witnesses saying they saw me? You know, I thought about suicide as well. Yeah.
And of course, it's a tough environment to be in at any time for any person.
Yeah.
But I guess if you're a sex offender and you have been convicted of rape,
yeah, it's the lowest of the low.
So how were you treated?
I was treated terribly, abominably. The prison officers, the screws we call them, they make every waking moment of your life in prison as miserable as they possibly can. You know, there's all kinds of ways they can and do that.
Like what?
You know, at Garth, when I was at Garth, for example, there was one guy. They try and intimidate you all the time. They try and push your buttons, make you kick off, and it works on a lot of people because there's a lot of volatile people there. But it never worked with me. But it comes at a psychological cost. They're demeaning you, they're intimidating you. You want to shout out and say something, but you just hold your tongue and take an awful lot of crap. You know, for example, HMP Franklin, I tried to get some new trainers, and you can only get them from approved suppliers. I think it's M&M's. I applied over and over and over again. The original applications go missing. It's a tactic they use on everybody who's refusing to do the courses. It's to grind you down. They don't so easily, you know, take you down the seg and give you a kicking, although it still happens. They go psychological warfare on you, and it's terrible. It's awful.
Were you subject to any violence from anyone while you were there, prisoner or
not subject
officer?
to, but there's a constant threat of it. You know, people are fronting up to you, challenging you, and you don't want to come across as too much of a sap and go, "Oh, please leave me alone." But you kind of, I hold my tongue a lot, you know, and just look at them, look at them straight back, and hope they don't smack me, or stab me, or burn me.
Were you telling other people in the prison that you were innocent? I mean,
Yeah.
the cliche is that everyone says they're innocent, right? But
Yeah, that is a cliche, and it's not true either.
not true.
No. Most people are very open with me and say, "Well, I did it," and a few guys said, "Well, I did it, and this is real hell being in here." So I can't imagine, if you're innocent, like you say, I can't imagine what you're going through.
Did they believe you?
Quite a few did. Quite a few didn't.
And you then tried to go through an appeals process,
Yeah.
which got nowhere.
No, they dismissed it. They just dismissed it.
Which raises questions, James, about the way the system works and the Criminal Cases Review Commission, which is the body that is charged to investigate these things. You found things they didn't.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really a catastrophic failure on their part, because they've got specific statutory powers that allow them to compel police forces to hand over material. We don't have a right of access like that at Appeal. You know, we had to take the police to court twice in order to get the disclosure that we got. And, you know, the CCRC, Andy first applied to them in 2009. And the evidence which the Court of Appeal yesterday ruled rendered Andy's conviction unsafe was sitting in police boxes of material since the time of his arrest, since the time of his conviction. And, you know, the CCRC, if they'd simply in 2009 got the police files, which they had the power to do.
Explain the CCRC.
So, the Criminal Cases Review Commission, the body that's meant to investigate miscarriages of justice, if they'd simply got those police files in 2009, went through them, they would have uncovered this evidence, and they probably would have saved Andy a decade in prison.
Why didn't they?
Yeah.
there's real issues with the CCRC. So, I mean, there is underfunding, but that doesn't anywhere near explain their failings. There's a real cultural issue, a sort of refusal to investigate cases because they see investigation often as speculative or a fishing expedition. And that's just a ridiculous mindset to have. If you don't look for evidence, you won't find it. And the difference is we look for it. And, you know, it took us a lot of time and effort, but eventually we found this stuff, but they could have found it very easily themselves.
I mean, you describe a total lack of curiosity, which is so fascinating because, I mean, look, you know, if you want to be a journalist, you've got to be curious. Yeah. And you would have thought, if you're part of a review commission, curiosity about what has happened and getting to the bottom of it is absolutely essential.
Absolutely. You need to start with a kind of curious, open mind. And there's a very revealing comment by one of their case review managers, that's the people who do the actual casework at the CCRC, which was recorded by an academic in a book about the CCRC written a few years back. And that case review manager basically said, well, it's obvious most of them have done it, i.e. most of them are guilty. And if you go into your job with that mindset, then of course you're going to convince yourself not to do investigation. So there's a real issue there.
So, having looked at this, having been so closely involved with this, do you come away with the impression that Andy got unlucky, but realistically the criminal justice system is basically sound? Or do you think there are real structural problems associated with the police, in this case Greater Manchester Police, and the appellant bodies that you go to? I'd like to hear both of you on that.
Andy, do you want to speak first?
Yeah, there's a real problem. Yeah, there's a real problem. There's many things could be fixed quite easily. I don't think the police should have control of evidence and disclosure. That should not be in their remit. They should concentrate on investigating cases, doing police work. You know, there should be a separate body that holds the evidence, so they can't. Because mine's not the only case where they've done this. They've deliberately destroyed pivotal evidence. I mean, the victim's clothing. I mean, that's obviously vital to preserve. But
I think they deliberately did that.
I think they deliberately did that. So to
strengthen their
to
case
expunge
against
any
you.
possibility of me ever, because they knew by then, when they started to weed it, as they said, they knew by then I was strenuously continuing to maintain my innocence after 10 years and onwards. You know,
I mean, that is shocking.
It is very shocking. Yeah, but I believe that's the truth. I think it's not an accident.
Do you think you met other innocent people in prison?
Yeah, I'm certain I did. Yeah.
Still serving?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. I have a friend who I can't identify, but I know for sure.
We've heard about the sort of the structural problems. I mean, I would imagine that Appeal gets endless letters from people saying, I'm a victim of a miscarriage of justice, I shouldn't be in prison. You're a small charity. How on earth do you decide which cases to take up, which cases you think, we're not going near this one?
I mean, we have to make really difficult decisions because we have limited resources.
You worked on this case for a long time.
Yeah.
How long have you worked on it?
Well, Appeal took on the case in 2017. I've been working on it for the last 5 years or so.
That's a lot of resources, a lot of money.
Yeah, and only a very small fraction of that was covered by legal aid. And you just look for those kind of clear kind of potential red flags in a case, the discrepancies with description, lack of forensic evidence, etc. So, and then from that starting point, you think, okay, if this person is innocent, what investigation should we do to try and find some evidence that supports that?
So now, welcome to the world.
Thank you.
A rainy August in London. But
I'd trade that any time for a single minute in prison.
I'm sure you absolutely would. How do you see the future? What about compensation?
Yeah, good point. Obviously, I want compensating because they can't give me back what they've stolen.
17 years of your life.
No, and it's not just the time taken. It's what it represents. It's constant fear, pain, anxiety, misery, longing, yearning for freedom, and hoping that something will come along to prove it. So it's a very joyless void. No joy, no happiness, no love, and it's a horrific existence. And I want compensating for that. The only way they can do that is to give me a bunch of money. And
how much have they offered you?
Nobody's offered me anything yet.
Do you have any idea how much you might receive?
No.
Is there any? I mean, the demeanour of government now. I heard the Justice Secretary on the radio this morning, who I thought was trying to strike a rather conciliatory tone, and was saying, look, anyone who's put in prison for a long time, you've got to put the wrongs right.
Yeah.
Do you feel that the people are waking up to this? Are sympathetic now in terms of how they're going to deal with your case?
I hope so, and I've got a generally positive feeling about the deluge of well-wishers, and it's a good move from the government to do what they've done, to rescind the ridiculous paying your captors for your own torture. Yeah, that's good, that's welcome, but there's much more needs to be done as well.
That was the idea of you having to pay
for your bed and board.
Your bed and board out of your compensation.
Yeah,
which seems extraordinary.
It's an incredible clawback mechanism to reduce what.
Not a hotel that you wish to stay in. I think it's fair to say.
But isn't there something now about compensation that you have to prove your innocence beyond reasonable doubt before you're entitled to compensation? Which, if you've had a court case overturned as unreliable in the British legal system,
you are innocent.
You are innocent because you're innocent or you're guilty.
Yeah, you would have thought you've already done all that. You've proved it amply.
But you don't need to prove it.
I don't need to prove it again, do I? Why is that a thing?
Greater Manchester Police have said that they're truly sorry for what happened. Do you accept their apology? Do you think that you don't? No,
because I don't think it's a genuine apology. I think it's a PR exercise from a corporate entity. They're not sorry. They fought us every inch of the way. We invited them to join. Appeal invited them to join this CCRC application, and they point blank refused. I don't even think they responded. They fought disclosure of the vital evidence that they knew was important. Of course, they must have known its significance. And they fought us all the way. So, and then suddenly, because it's been overturned, say, "Oh, we're really sorry now." No.
I suppose the other person in this that it must be appalling for is the victim.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, she's probably been re-traumatised by all this, thinking she got the right guy. It's not her fault at all. I want to make that clear.
Of course not.
It's the way the police, the Greater Manchester Police, got a terribly traumatised woman to identify. She falsely identified me, but she wasn't in a good frame of mind either. It was a loaded lineup as well. I think I was the only dark-skinned guy on it, and I think I had the same T-shirt. So it would be easy for somebody to. I've no proof of this, but it'd be very easy for some officer to go, guy in the black shirt.
But she has presumably now has to live with the fact that she thought that the person who
had committed
awful. The crime had gone to prison, and he hasn't, and he may well still be at large.
Yeah, and 20 years later, she's having to relive it all.
The system let her down as well.
Yeah. It's not just me. The damage is immense. They've caused immense damage.
And your family and friends, I mean, at the time, you were obviously saying, look, I'm innocent. Did they all believe you?
Yeah, I'm sure they did, Nobody's
That must have been a source of comfort.
Yeah, it was, Nobody ever said to me, we don't believe you, we think you might have done it. Nobody said that. They was all staunch behind me.
It's a weird question, I know, but did you take anything from the prison experience? I mean, obviously it's changed you profoundly and you've got to live with it for the rest of your life and there's no getting away from it. Did you learn anything?
Did you take anything positive, you mean?
Yeah. Do you think you'll ever be able to get to a place where
I think it's such a negative, terrible thing to have to endure. It's hard to put anything positive spin on it. But I did. For example, I did an Open University degree in maths and physics. I got that. I got my BSc. And from that, I used that as a springboard to go for a master's in a southern university. But I had to stop because of the news of the DNA matching an unknown guy. I just couldn't focus anymore. But I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned strengths I never knew I had through adversity.
Sure.
Like anybody in a similar situation would.
Andy, let me ask you a sort of slightly crappy question that you get asked at careers interviews, where someone says to you, "So, tell me, how do you see yourself in 5 years' time?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not quite, and I don't mean that in terms of, well, I'll be working at a whatever, or I'll be an astrophysicist at some research laboratory.
That would be nice.
And that would be great. But I mean, I just wonder how you see kind of life in. Is it about sleeping well? Is it about what is it you yearn for? What is it you crave in life?
Yeah, it's actually a good question. I want my freedom back fully. I want my economic freedom back. want my compensation.
Do you not feel totally free now, even now?
Not really, no, because there's still fights to be fought, you know. So I'm not free of it. It's not. I can't go. What? That's that done.
Yeah.
I can't.
The door hasn't shut yet.
No, the door hasn't shut yet. I'm still, you know, fighting and haunted by it. I think I need therapy, to be honest.
Are you going to go to engage in therapy?
Yeah, we're looking into it.
Sure.
Yeah.
But the 5-year view. I mean, you know, hopefully in a year's time, maybe these legal battles will be behind you.
I hope so.
And then, you know,
after that,
yeah.
I want to resume travelling while I'm still able-bodied. I'm getting on a bit. I'm 57 now. You know, I want to travel to lots of places in the world I've never seen before. India, example. I want to go to Australia to see my sisters. I haven't seen them for 33 years. I just want to travel and feel that sense of freedom again, where you know, you've got no worries. Brexit. I was a permanent resident in Holland. As 2016 approached, had I not been kidnapped by the UK state, I would have applied for Dutch nationality, a Dutch passport, and I would have almost certainly have got it because of my long-standing association. So I would have been there 25, 30 years by that point. So I was robbed of that opportunity to have, you know, I don't want to be a UK citizen, to be honest. I don't want to be associated with this country anymore. I would like, ideally, in an ideal world, to have a Dutch passport and resume my EU status. I identify as a European above and beyond being English. I'm English by default. I was born here. So I would like, if possible, for the ministers this side to contact the ministers on the Dutch side and see if they can perhaps arrange for me a Dutch passport as a humanitarian, compassionate gesture after what I've endured and the position it's left me in, not being able to visit Europe for more than 3 months at a time because of Brexit. I should be a Dutch citizen now.
Very, very best of luck to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for coming in to talk to us.
You're welcome.
And maybe come back and talk to us again a bit further down the road when hopefully some of these things are behind you.
Sure, I would love to.
And James, let us salute you as well for the indefatigable work that you have done on this.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.